Tobias and the Dragon. Once upon a time there was a poor man called Tobias. He lived in a little cottage with his wife and children. Soon they had so many children that there wasn't enough money to feed them all. So one beautiful day, Tobias decided to set out to seek his fortune. "When I come back here, there will be enough for all of us," he told his wife, and he kissed her goodbye. Before he left, he secretly put a piece of cream cheese in his pocket, and then he went on his way. Tobias had walked and walked a long way until he came to a meadow. And right in the middle of the meadow there stood a huge dragon, a big, fierce dragon, belching flames. Tobias was terrified, but he knew that fear would get him nowhere, so he bravely marched right up to the dragon. "Now then, you miserable dragon," he said, "what are you doing here?" The dragon was rather shocked. "What am I doing here? This meadow belongs to me," he said. "We'll soon see about that," said Tobias boldly. "Let's have a contest. And I warn you, I'm terribly strong." So they decided to have a contest. The dragon was very, very suspicious. He was wondering how Tobias would have more strength than he could. He was a dragon and he was huge. Tobias was a little man. There was no way he could win. Tobias picked up a piece of rock and gave it to the dragon. "See what you can squeeze out of this," he said. Without a word, the dragon grabbed the rock, and huffing and puffing, he crumbled it into dust. "Not bad," said Tobias, "but I can do better. I can squeeze cream cheese out of the rock." He picked up another rock and took the cream cheese secretly out of his pocket. He pressed it against the rock and he squeezed. The dragon saw something dripping from the stone, and he leant over and tasted it. "It's cream cheese, all right," he said, much impressed. "Well, if you're that strong, let's be friends. Come home with me and meet my family." So they walked on side by side until they reached the dragon village. It was in the dragon village that they found the rest of the family at supper in the big dragon house. Father Dragon gave Tobias a hard stare, but the dragon said, "This is my friend, and you must be nice to him because he is terribly strong, and if you make him cross, he will destroy all of us." So Mother Dragon asked Tobias to sit down and have supper. The stew was so delicious that he ate more than all the dragons put together. For a whole week the dragons were very nice to Tobias. They treated him so well because they were scared that he would destroy them all. Tobias had breakfast in bed every morning, and by the time he got up, it was time for lunch. So he got up and he ate lunch. He kept on eating and eating until dinner time. And when he finished dinner time, it was bedtime again. And all the while he did absolutely nothing else. One day, Mother Dragon had had enough. "I think it's about time you did some work, Tobias. Go and fetch some water from the well." Tobias knew he could never budge a huge dragon bucket, but he was smart. He had an idea. "If I carry the bucket, I won't be able to see the road," he said to the dragon friend. "Why don't you show me the way?" So the silly dragon picked up the bucket and Tobias and carried them both there. As soon as they arrived, Tobias began to dig a trench right around the well. "What are you doing?" asked the dragon. "I'm taking the well home with me," replied Tobias, "to save us having to fetch water every day." The dragon cried in dismay, "You can't do that. 7 dragon villages use this well, and if you take it away, there will be war." Tobias stopped digging and said, Well, in that case, you can get the water yourself. So the dragon filled the bucket, put it on his shoulder with Tobias on top of it, and they went home. Tobias got out of that one. The next day, Mother sent them to fetch wood from the forest. The dragon soon got to work, tearing up all the trees by the roots, as was his custom. Tobias was scared because he could hardly break one little twig by himself, but he was pretty smart. He had an idea. He tied a rope right around the forest and said, "I'll take the whole forest home to save us from having to fetch wood every day." "You can't do that," cried the dragon. "7 dragon villages use this forest, and if you take it away, there will be war." "Well, in that case, you can fetch the wood by yourself," said Tobias. So the dragon tore up more trees, put them on his shoulder with Tobias on top, and they went home. When he got home, Mother Dragon was furious. "What kind of a dragon are you?" she said. "That Tobias is making a fool of you. You must get rid of him, or else you can leave yourself right now." The dragon scratched his head. "I know. Tobias, I challenge you to a fight. If you win, you can have a barrel of gold, but if you lose, you must go home." Tobias scratched his head. "Oh, this is going to be hard. How am I going to beat him?" he thought. "Very well, but on one condition," he said to the dragon. "You can choose the weapons, but I'll choose the place." "Right," said the dragon fiercely. "We'll fight with sticks." And he tore up a great tree trunk for a stick, and Tobias picked up a little axe handle. "Come on, dragon, we'll fight in the pigsty," he said. In the tiny sty, the dragon could hardly move, let alone fight, so Tobias thrashed him with the axe handle until the dragon cried for mercy and gasped, you win, take the barrel of gold." Then the dragon, to try and get his own back, suggested a sneezing competition. They went into the dragon house, and the dragon sneezed with such a roar that Tobias nearly stuck to the ceiling. When Tobias recovered, he began to stuff bits of rags into the cracks of the wall. "Why are you stuffing the cracks?" asked the dragon. "So that they won't let out any of my sneeze," said Tobias. "This way I'll be sure that when I do sneeze, the house explodes," he said. The dragon fell to his knees and begged Tobias to spare their poor house. "Take another barrel of gold instead," he cried. Then the dragon suggested a shouting competition. "Very well," said Tobias, "but go to the blacksmith first and have your head hooped in iron, otherwise it will crack." That was enough for the dragon, and he quickly measured out a 3rd barrel of gold. He knew he was beaten. Now that he had so much gold, Tobias decided that it was time to go home. So he tied his 3 barrels to the dragon's back, sat himself on top and said, "Gee up!" The dragon trotted on meekly like a little pony, and on the way people laughed to see such a fierce dragon looking like a little horse. But at last they reached Tobias's house. The dragon was much relieved to have got rid of this dangerous friend at last, and happily said goodbye. On his way home, Tobias met a fox. "What kind of a dragon are you?" sneered the fox. "That Tobias is a well-known cheat, and he's made a right fool out of you. Come back with me, and for a chicken and 9 eggs, I will get back your gold." The dragon felt like a real silly dragon, and it made him so angry. He would get his gold back and destroy Tobias into the bargain. So he marched back with the fox, belching flames. Tobias saw them coming. Oh dear, if he didn't think of something very quickly now, he'd certainly be destroyed, and no mistake. Just in the nick of time, sure enough, he did have an idea. He scowled angrily and shouted at the fox, "What is this? Didn't you promise to get me 9 dragon skins, you rascal? Do you mean to fob me off with this one miserable dragon?" The dragon was so scared to hear this that he trampled over the fox, took to his heels, and didn't stop running until he got home. As for Tobias, well, he built a fine house with all his gold, big enough for all his family, and the dragons are still as frightened of him as if he had a dragon for breakfast every day. The end.